It's kind of like American foreign policy. And likewise, it's very evil to do.
Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the good sense to do away with the whole notion, I welcome you to the premier audio medium for all your Fazbear entertainment needs. The Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Note, FFPP is not responsible for any loss of appetite, disinterest, dismemberment, or other legally classified statuses. So strap in and enjoy.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I'm your host of the Toast, Rytoast, here to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's like we always do. Secret of the Mimic, it's still going to be Secret of the Mimic. I'm not going to even pretend like we're going to talk about, oh, actually, I had this interesting thought on FNAF 4. I mean, I did, but it's in relation to Secret of the Mimic. I talked a lot about what I wanted to on the last episode, which is why it was like 45 minutes of me yapping straight with no questions answered. And I thought today I still had something I want to bring up before we just start going into questions, but we're going to be primarily doing questions today. At least that's my plan. We'll see how it goes. I am a yapologist, so we will find out. I'm at an angle because Marq really wants attention right now. You can see him right here. He's a good boy. But if I don't pet him, watch him. The nuzzles are fine. See, if he just nuzzled, I'd be like, yeah, sure, whatever, my guy. But eventually, he grows impatient. Yep. Oh. See that? He's not trying to scratch me, but he's basically like extending his paw to be like, hey. And he's got claws. And it like kind of hurts a little bit. I've Pavloved him, where every time I turn on the studio lights, he comes up for attention, which on one hand is really sweet. I'm glad that I get to pet this guy as part of my job. And on the other hand, when I'm not recording a main video, is a little annoying. But it's okay. He's a sweet boy. Secret of the Mimic, though. Today, I kind of wanted to focus on the business aspect of things, because I've got some thoughts, and I've seen some people misinterpreting, or at least in my opinion, misinterpreting what we learn about the business side of things with Fazbear's and with Murray's Costume Manor. I mean, because I see a lot of people, and some people, it seems like genuine, like there's a lot of confusing information in this game, so some people are just taking it in a different way. I've seen some people almost like cynically overcorrect what this game is telling us, to the point where I've seen people be like, oh, so Henry and William never invented an animatronic in their lives. And it's like, no, that's not what we're learning here. So I just kind of want to go over my take on what we learn about the business side of things with Fazbear's and with Murray's Costume Manor in Secret of the Mimic. So in Secret of the Mimic, we learn a lot about how Murray's Costume Manor helped facilitate several Fazbear Entertainment projects. Now, this is something we didn't have a lot of information going in on. Really, it's because we don't have a lot of information about the infancy of either of these companies. And we still really don't. But we definitely learned a bit more about how Fazbear Entertainment had functioned up until this point. So, it's interesting that as far as we're aware, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opened up in 1983. And the original owners owned Fredbear's Family Pizza, according to FNAF 2, right? It was like, we're trying to reach the original owners. Something about a Fredbear's Family Diner. We got to find that. I think I flubbed earlier, but you know what I mean. So a lot of us were assuming, and I especially championed the idea that Fazbear Entertainment formed as a public entity to create Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, so that Fredbear's Family Diner, which was privately owned, would remain safe in the event that Fazbear's went under. This game pretty handily proves that wrong, because as far back as 1979, Fazbear Entertainment is an established company. Right alongside Fredbear's, right alongside and this is before Freddy Fazbear's Pizza existed. We know Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is established as a restaurant in 1983. All the way back in 1979, Fazbear Entertainment is still a company. So Fredbear's Family Diner was likely still owned underneath Fazbear Entertainment. Which is a little weird, but whatever. That's not a huge deal. And we know it's Fazbear specifically because not only is it said multiple times, but when I was going out of bounds, I noticed that several of the boxes had Fazbear Entertainment product on, like, especially in like the workshop, had that label on it. it. So it's like, okay, Fazbear is sending them stuff to help create stuff for Fazbear. This makes sense. That being said, Fazbear had a contract with Edwin Murray. Now, it seems like Edwin Murray and Henry Emily, at least, were business partners already. It seems, frankly, like him, Henry, and William were 3 very close business associates, if not friends. Now, we get this from Edwin's perspective, and Edwin, as we learn through these audio tapes, is a really lonely guy, especially after Fiona's death. He, kind of desperately... I think it's the idea of the fact that Edwin is so linked to business that, or at least to the family business, that he has trouble separating coworker from friend. We see this in the sense that, even when Edwin is proposing to Fiona, he's like, yeah, we met when you started working at the company, and he talks in one of the tapes after Fiona's death, it's been a little rough, so I was thinking maybe we could all go up to the house and play some board games, eat some pizza. Fiona used to love that we would hang out like friends and all that, so extending the invitation to you guys or whatever. And it's like, man, Edwin only talks to people who work at Murray's Costume Manor, so he is lonely. So I don't know how much of this friendship between Edwin, William, and Henry is real, and how much of it is Edwin was always a business partner, but Edwin saw that more as a friendship because he is emotionally stunted. Regardless, it seems like there was a long-standing partnership between Murray's Costume Manor and Fazbear Entertainment, where he was taking on several jobs for them, including the Springlocks, where he mentions, why do we have to change the Springlock design? Why can't we just get some teenagers to do it like we always do? Which implies they've been doing it for a while. This does give credence to the idea that Fredbear's Family Diner existed earlier in the 70s, if not before then. And it also gives credence to the idea that, now this is where a lot of confusion, or at least I believe a lot of confusion comes in, the idea that Edwin made the Springlocks. Now, this is still something that I think is very plausible here. But I don't think it's in the way that some people are thinking. So the Springlocks are an interesting question here, because he mentions changing the design, and he's like, why should we bother changing the design? And we have another audio tape, or no, I think it's an email. We have something from Fiona saying like, hey, Edwin, can you work on those Springlock suits? One of my actors almost lost his entire arm. And that tracks with what we know about Springlocks, like a little bit of water, you're dead. Meanwhile, the Springlocks we see in this game are not only safe to wear after who knows how long, but our main character, Arnold, falls at least 15 to 20 feet straight down in rubble in a Springlock suit and is fine. Nurse Dolly says there was a Springlock failure, and if that's true, or if it isn't, we're alive. So either it didn't happen and she's wrong, or it did happen and a Springlock failure no longer hurts the user. So that's not the Fredbear's Springlock suit. We saw with Springtrap, a wet, barely used suit that gets put on and used too quickly. William Afton dies for real. So it's interesting that these Springlock suits are seemingly safer than the ones that are used at Fazbear locations. Not to mention, there are a Fredbear and Spring Bonnie Springlock suit at the Prototype Pizzeria, which we'll get to, but they look very different from the Spring Bonnie Springlock suit that we see eventually on Springtrap. It looks incredibly different. And that kind of goes back to the design and how much was used by Fazbear and what have you. So let me lay down what I believe is the timeline of events here, and hopefully that helps explain my thoughts on what the information we have is trying to tell us. So I think that Edwin was making animatronics for Fazbear at some point, but I don't think he ever finished them. So there was a long-standing partnership between Fazbear and Murray's Costume Manor, and we know that Edwin is able to make animatronics that look similar to Fazbear ones. Look at Dolly, look at Mr. Helpful. Not to mention that Helpy as a character is adopted by Fazbear moving forward, a character that was originally seemingly created by Edwin Murray. But whether it's, because of competition or William woke up one day and just thought it would be funny, Fazbear as a company, or more directly, William Afton and Henry Emily, pretty much decide hey, Murray's Costume Manor is kind of failing right now. What if we intentionally destroy it so we can buy up the company? And it's this idea of here's our, slight competitor / contractor. If we buy up all of their assets, it suddenly gets a lot cheaper to work with them. So while Murray's Costume Manor was probably making masks and merchandise and maybe some extra suits for Fazbears, suddenly Fazbear approaches with the biggest contract Edwin's ever seen. Right? It's the Fazbear contract, the one that he keeps saying, if I get this contract done, everything goes back to normal, we'll have money again, we'll be able to work correctly again. This is the contract to save the company. So what is a contract that big, and what does it entail? Well, I think that's what we see in the parachute.exe ending, when we go underneath the Murray's Costume Manor, and we see that prototype Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. It's an entire pizzeria, a fake one, in the basement. And I think it is notable that it's connected to the Welcome Show. Because a lot of people, myself included, were sat there asking, why in the hell is there a pizzeria underneath Murray's Costume Manor? Why would they need to make a fake pizzeria? And I think besides just the idea of besides the idea of trying to make Murray's go under, we already have several showrooms for Murray's Costume Manor. We have the Big Top showroom, which has a fake circus in it. We have the Birthday showroom, which has Jackie's room. We have Storytime showroom, which has this beautiful set. We have the Retail showroom, which not only you can buy stuff, but it shows you how this stuff looks in a store. I think the Fazbear contract was to make a restaurant showroom, a fake pizzeria specifically to show clients, look at what our robotics could look like in your restaurant. And that's why this whole fake pizzeria was being built, and why it's connected to the Welcome Show. It's specifically so you can go down there and show someone, look, here's how your stuff would look here's how our stuff would look at your restaurant. And that's part of the reason why this contract is so lucrative for Murray's Costume Manor, because not only would it be a massive undertaking to build this, so it would require massive funding, but if this is built successfully, now they have a whole new demographic they can directly sell better to. Because before, if you were a restaurateur, Murray's would be look at how good these people could work in your restaurant, but you wouldn't have that tangible example. Now you would. Now you go into the pizzeria and you see these animatronics performing on stage, and you can see it by yourself in person. Look how good this could be for you. And because the primary stars are Fazbear characters, an established brand that is seemingly doing well at this point in the timeline, you can be and our number one client, Fazbear Entertainment, loves it. Look at their example. You could have one of your very own. So that makes total sense why they're creating this fake pizzeria. That being said, that's why it's the perfect bait. Because for whatever reason, William and Henry were I want to destroy this man's life. They woke up and said, it'd be really funny. And as Edwin is working on this contract, the pizzeria is built. Right? We look at the pizzeria itself, that's fairly done. It's the animatronics that are still in production. And these animatronics keep getting change requests. We get several audio logs and several emails about Edwin growing frustrated with the Fazbear contract. The idea of the arts were approved, the drafts were approved, the prototypes were approved, and then they move into production, they start, making this stuff, and suddenly Fazbear goes, actually no, change everything. And it seems like they did this a few times. to the point where, it becomes economically ruinous if your contractee keeps telling you to change stuff after you've already spent so much time and money prepping it, right? That's why we go through, when we do a contract, that's why you go through drafts, you go through approvals, because you want to make sure the least amount of time is being wasted as possible, because as business says, time is money. So the fact that you spent, imagine you're broke, you're desperately broke, but someone says, hey, here's a $1 million job. If you do this job to my specifications, it'll take about 2 months, you'll have $1 million. You go, let's do it. And then you get to 1 month and 25 days, and you're about to be finished, and they go, actually, I changed my mind, I don't like any of this, let's start over. And now, it's been 2 months where you haven't gotten paid yet, and you need to wait 2 more months to get paid. You're going bankrupt somewhere in between there. It's why there are a lot of legal securities nowadays of contract work and legal loopholes like that, where there are, terms in the contract of you can only correct so many times. You need to send in corrections on a timely manner, or else they will be ignored. That way both parties are being protected. But this is the 70s, and it's also a video game, so, those protections seem to not be there. And Edwin Murray, whose company is underwater, who is barely holding things together, who is going bankrupt, is now about to get a payday for a massive, massive client deal, and suddenly the timeline doubles. And it's looking really bad. That's where we get a lot of the audio logs of Edwin being like, they're not your friends, they're using you, never trust them, never tell them about this. And we see those things he was working on his computer in his office. The Alt Fazbear designs and Puppet designs. The debate right now is what are those files? Because there's something we don't get to see. I think Fazbear's, at this point in the timeline, only had Fredbear's as a location, but they were about to launch Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and they needed to work in the background to get this ready to go. So I think this contract was them kind of being like, hey, here's how we do this. How about we hire you, Mr. Murray, to make this fake pizzeria and make us these animatronics. You can keep the fake pizzeria and a copy of the animatronics to sell to future clients, and we take that first draft for our new restaurant venture. And so when we look at the file Alt Fazbear Designs, I don't think it's literally, here's an alternative version of the Fazbear characters. Here are the design. I think the file is, here are the designs for the alternative Fazbear restaurant, not Fredbear's Family Diner. Those designs are set in stone. We are making an alternative restaurant, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which would have Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and the puppet. I think that makes a lot of sense. So going back to the contract itself and how it ruins Edwin Murray. So Murray starts, he's going through this long, arduous process. It's supposed to be all hush-hush. Employees are getting impatient with him. The company keeps going more and more under. And not only, unbeknownst to Edwin, not only was the plan seemingly from the start to ruin Edwin Murray's company, but at the same time, as things are bad, as money is drying, as all this stuff is happening, William Afton is secretly poaching employees, which is something that is illegal now, but not in the 70s, and this is a video game. With the idea is that you're directly approaching employees of a company and saying like, hey, you work here, this is your pay. What if you come work for me? I will pay you more, I will give you more benefits, and if you get other employees from your company to work for me, I'll give you a bonus. It's slimy, it's sleazy, but it works really well, and a lot of people start jumping ship from Murray's costume manner. Now, this is again making things take longer. If this contract was supposed to be, say, 6 months, and, he gets 5 months in and suddenly they want to change everything, now the timeline goes back to another 6 months. So a 6-month contract gets turned to an 11-month contract. But if you add 100 employees for that 6-month contract, those 100 employees get it done in 6 months. And now not only is your timeline reset, but 60 of your employees were poached by Fazbear, and you only have 40 employees left. Now this 6-month contract, if math lines up right, is going to take you 11 months instead, which now is taking this 6-month contract and making it a 17 to 18-month process. So money that you needed by 6 months, you're not seeing for a year and a half. This will destroy a company. Even if Edwin Murray was in good standing with his company, following this path would destroy any company. And I think Edwin Murray knew that. But he was so desperate with how bad the company was that he was willing to take that offer. And he was so trusting with William and Henry because he saw them as friends. Because as we've established, Edwin Murray only really sees people as friends, not co-workers. So, all of this goes through. He makes the designs get rejected. He makes the designs get rejected. And then finally, he has to file for bankruptcy. And it's at that moment where William Afton swoops in to save him, all in air quotes. Because as the company is at its lowest, he's about to file for bankruptcy, he's about to give it all up, all William Afton has to do is go, hey, you tried your best. But obviously some things are out of your control. Obviously some things are a little too tough for just your company to work on. So how about you guys join my company? We've got more employees, we've got more funding, and we currently have more revenue. So you can keep working just under us. And you can keep making that contract under us. And we'll pay you. But what you're making is now ours. It's kind of a perfect plan. Cripple a company and then buy it up. It's kind of like American foreign policy. And likewise, it's very evil to do. So that being said, does Edwin take it? I think maybe he would have, but I think this is around the time when he starts obsessing over M2 and eventually gets killed. So I don't think he ever has the opportunity to. But I think it was would be something he would have accepted. Although, to be fair, he starts to really hate William and Henry by the end of this, understandably. We get that one line where it's like, they treat me like a contractor they can crack a whip at, which, like, isn't he legally a contractor? Which, again, leans into the idea of, like, he saw themselves as business partners and, more importantly, as friends. Which, like, is not and was not true, apparently. So then, to put a capstone on this, that's kind of the business and how they ruin MCM. But then, is this to say that all these animatronics were made by Edwin, and the original FNAF game was made by Edwin and not, say, Henry, who said, like, yes, trapped in prisons of my making? I don't think so, right? Because we look at the designs in the pizzeria, and they are kind of like the main three. You see the bones of the original Freddy's gang, but that's what they were left at, right? They were left like that. So even if that was the bones being built on, Henry would have had to make the rest. But we look at the one audio log complaining about the new designs, where Edwin is like, why would they want to change the design? Fiona's design is great. The new ones Fazbear sent over are just downright creepy. They can't make me change Fiona's designs. I think that in itself is our evidence that the versions Murray's Costume Man are made of the Fazbear gang were not the final ones that were used, right? In fact, I think I know where Fiona's designs end up. We hear from these tapes that he thinks Fiona's designs are way more cute. And I agree. Generally, I think Fiona's designs in this game are very good. And then, now, I'll save, this gets into some crazy speculation. So sticking with this, he's like, they can't make me change Fiona's designs. And soon after, the project goes unfinished because Edwin goes missing. I think that is to say that one of the proofs they sent over of like, oh, you need to change everything was what they were going to do. And then when Edwin goes missing, then Henry has to step in and make the Fazbear animatronics, which may or may not have been based on the bones that Edwin had created. But I still think the evidence here suggests that Henry was the one who made the original FNAF gang and Edwin was contracted to, but didn't. Now, here's where it gets a little crazy. We hear directly that Fiona had cuter designs that did not get that Edwin was going to make regardless of what Fazbear wanted. And then we look at what M2 puts on in the pizzeria. He puts on an amalgamation of scrap that's in that workshop. And he puts on a Bonnie head that looks a lot like the toy Bonnie head. I wonder if Fiona's designs were eventually used by Fazbear, as they are Fazbear property by the end of the game, but not for the animatronics in the first Freddy's Pizzeria, but rather in the new Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria in FNAF 2. After all, the toy animatronics are literally the animatronics, but cuter. It's the animals, but with a cuter design. And Edwin points out that Fiona's designs are cuter than the ones Fazbear sent over. Now, again, this could be biased, this could be nothing, but I think it's worthwhile to bring up, especially since everything Fiona's ever made is under the control of Fazbear now. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on the business and my explanations for why I don't think that everything was made by Edwin and Henry didn't do anything. I think it's that Edwin was hired to either create prototypes or work on stuff that was already made, and instead, he never finished because of M2 shenanigans and because of going bankrupt. So Henry stepped in and made the small prisons of his making. So I think that's enough yapping about Secret of the Mimic by myself. I think it's time to take out questions, but before we do, I'm having trouble keeping my eyes open because I'm very tired and it's very hot. But lucky for me, I've got some caffeine right here in the form of Gamersupps. It's a leading gaming nutrition / drink brand. You know, it's powdered beverages that you put into mix with water, and they have caffeine and non-caffeine versions. They also have soups that are pretty damn good. They've got snacks that I haven't tried yet, but I'm excited to. They have tea that's pretty damn good. Right now, I am drinking BBL. It is their blueberry lemonade flavor, one of my favorite flavors they've ever made. They have a really good acai blueberry flavor, and when they made Bowberry, they used part of that. When they made this, they used part of that. Whatever their blueberry flavor is, it's very good, and I like it. And I like lemonade, so this is great for me. This is the caffeine one, though, because like I'm said, I'm tired. Oh, man. Not to chug that. But it's also really hot. I turned off my fan for recording, and like this is also iced, so like it's just refreshing. But if you want to get some Gamersupps and support the channel, because I get a little kickback every time you purchase with this, if you use code RYTOAST, you'll get 10% off your entire order on Gamersupps. So go ahead and do that. It supports me. It supports you by giving you good products. And it's pretty good. And like I said, if you want a flavor recommendation, I'm a really fruity guy. Happy Pride. But also, most of their fruit flavors I really like. I don't like tropical fruit flavors, so I'm not a huge fan of like mangoes or passion fruit or stuff like that. But they have like chug juice. It's like a mixed berry lemon lime. It's delicious. Pestile's Antidote is a lime creator flavor, and it's so good. Good, literally just called good, is like a cherry slushy. There's a lot of really good flavors on there. I would check them out. Anyway. We're going to move on to questions. So if you want your questions answered on the podcast, you should send them into Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. That is in the description to copy and paste because it's a pain to type out. But our first question comes from Kim, they, them. Are the sweeper bots powered by Remnant? Besides the Mimic, they are the only thing still running as intended. No signs of wear and tear. 12 teams were sent before Arnold. How many cleaner bots are they? How many cleaner bots are there? Batteries only last so long, and the ones from the 70s, there are no cables on the little guys. Thank you for your question. I want to say no. Like my gut reaction for are the Clean-O-Vacs powered by Remnant is no. And there's a couple reasons for it. One, it does feel unnecessary, right? Like Remnant is one of those things that's so important to the games. I would only want to bring it up if it's necessary to explain something. And I don't think it is. So as far as the Clean-O-Vacs go, we don't know what they're powered by. This could be a case of, video game logic where they're still functional, because technically they're not the only things that are still functional. Several of the mannequins that make noise when you walk by are still functional. The Mr. Helpful and Mrs. Helpful stations, which are probably definitely plugged in, they are still functional. Digityper. There's one Digityper in the manager's office that is functional, and it's one that Jackie destroys. And I think that is interesting, and it kind of leans into what we're seeing with the Clean-O-Vacs. The Digityper is very human-like. It's very like, it's acting like a human, it's trying to work, and I think that's the big thing. It's trying to work, right? And we open it in a locked room, suddenly the Mimic is in there, and the first thing the Mimic does, it could have killed us. It could have killed us and the whole game wouldn't happen. But the Mimic as Jackie enters that room, and the first thing it does is demolish and rip apart the Digityper. Wait, hold on. I just thought of something, and I could just be misremembering. I need to check exactly what the Digityper says before it's destroyed. Okay, Jackie starts beating him up before he says anything. Part of me, it would have been such an insane reveal if right before Jackie destroys the Digityper, if it said, back to work. Because think about it. If the Mimic, specifically M2, is still very hateful towards Edwin, what was Edwin's whole thing? Ignoring his family to go back to work. And here's the Digityper, whose one of his lines is, back to work. So I think that'd be a cool thing. But at least in the video that I pulled up, I don't know if it's random or whatnot. At least in the video I pulled up, he just goes, he doesn't say anything. And then right before he gets destroyed, Jackie gets closer and goes, welcome, new user. And then he's destroyed. But regardless. I think it's a matter of the Mimic seems to not have random aggression. Specifically M2 seems to only destroy humans or things that remind it of humans. So the Digityper is basically an office worker, so that's kind of explained there. But we see this when we put on the Springlock suit. The Mimic doesn't attack us. And in fact, in some cases, when we're wearing a Springlock suit, if the Mimic runs up and sees us, it waves at us and moves on. It seems completely neutral to other animatronics that don't remind it of people. The puppet show is allowed to exist perfectly fine. The prototypes in the basement are perfectly fine. Big Top is left alone. Now, I think when it's chasing us, Big Top is controlled by the Mimic. But I still think, Big Top, it can exist not being controlled and is left alone. The Helpfuls are left alone. The entire Welcome Show is left alone. And similarly, the Clean-O-Vacs are left alone. And I think it's a matter of the reason they're not destroyed, and we'll go into power, but the reason they're not destroyed, I think, is because M2 isn't just mindlessly destroying everything. I think M2 is really pissed off at humanity, or at least workers/people. So, that's the things that it is hunting down, killing, and stuffing into suits. And likewise, the Clean-O-Vacs, I think, would be additionally spared because it seems like the Mimic program was built off of the programming that Edwin was using in a lot of his inventions. Programs that learn based off of their environment. And the Clean-O-Vac is one of them, right? The Clean-O-Vac was built off of this similar programming, where it can change its shape to fit anything, and it can, pretend to be your friend and all that. So there's that. Power, I have less of a good explanation for. That's why they're not destroyed by the Mimic. How are they still powered? I would say, maybe they were designed to either have a multi-year battery life. Maybe they have charging stations they can go to. Maybe they are solar power. I don't know. The power I don't have an explanation for. But as far as we don't have an explanation for this power source, it must be Remnant, I think is dangerous logic. Because I feel like FNAF as a sci-fi adjacent series is going to have unexplainable robotics at times. And I think one of those that's going to frequently be dismissed for ease is a source of power. I think it's kind of a video game decision. And this does feel like a cop-out, I admit it. But I'd say it's kind of like a video game decision where Steelwool was and Steelwool and Scott were these Clean-O-Vacs are really cute. It'd be really fun if, to explain why some of the areas are cleaner than others, there are functional Clean-O-Vacs wandering around. And that was kind of these are really cute, let's do it. And I do think there's an argument to be made that the Clean-O-Vacs eventually end up as the wet floor bots. The eyes are similar. They have a similar, cleanliness function. And I think there's something to that. I get the sense that a lot of the technology in MCM is reused for the Pizzaplex at least. But yeah, so I would say the reason I don't think they're destroyed because I don't think M2 gives a shit about destroying robotics. I think it's friendly and or neutral to them. And then as far as how is it still powered, I think that's a suspension of disbelief. I would say there's probably a charging station that we're not privy to see, but I don't think Remnant is involved with them. That would be my take. But thank you for your question. And again, I don't mean this to say that it can't be, but I don't see any compelling evidence for it to be. But thank you for your question. Our next one comes from Kieran, he, him. In the marketing for Secret of the Mimic, Jackie was basically the only animatronic they showed, for understandable reasons, keep their best for last and all that. But she was only really in the first section of the game. After that, we don't see her again, except for the Mimic using her voice. Why do you think this is? Was she always planned to have such a small role, or was this the case of cut content? Also, apart from what happened to her IRL, what happened to her in-game? Like, where is she after the fall in the vent? Shouldn't she be in the office, same as us? Thank you for your question. So, there's two questions here. As for your first question, I think that was the plan from the start, because, like, the point of the Mimic is that it can swap costumes at any time. And I think the reason the majority of marketing was around Jackie is twofold. One, new character and a visually distinct character, a character that works really well in marketing. But doubly so, because Jackie is only in the first in-game hour of time, you can market the hell out of the game using Jackie without spoiling any of your game, right? Like, you're showing off all this stuff with Jackie, and it's only going to spoil the first, 30 to 45 minutes of the game. And then that way, the rest of the game can be pretty fully blind. Meanwhile, you've still marketed your game sufficiently. So I think it's the best of both worlds. I think the plan from the start was that Jackie was just one of the costumes the Mimic would wear. That being said, where is Jackie? I think it is important, and we do need to talk about the fact that we don't see Jackie after we defeat her. When we defeat Big Top, his corpse stays there. When we defeat Dolly, her exoskeleton is left there. But when we defeat Jackie, we never see where that costume ends up. So as far as where is she? I don't know. She might just be lost in the vents somewheres. But I think it is important to point out that we don't get to see Jackie after we defeat her. That seems meaningful enough to point out to me. So it's something I don't have an answer for you, but I think it is worthwhile to point out, and I'm glad you did. Thank you for your question. Our next one comes from Apex Dragonoid. Heyo. He, him. I saw the name Ralph in one of the logs, and if it's the same Ralph that would end up being Phone Guy, then does him being an employee for Edwin explain why in FNAF 2 he doesn't remember properly if Fredbear's was the name of the original location, because he wasn't an employee at that point? I'm glad you bring this up. I want to say yes, straight up, but I bring up this question not only to say hi, but because I want to talk about Ralph. We get a lot of names of other people in the email logs of this game. And it kind of sets up and Easter eggs a lot of other stuff throughout the game. Like one of them in FNAF 6, you can buy a lot of mediocre melodies from Stan's Discount Tech, or Stan's Budget Tech, or whatever it is. And in this game, we get an email from a guy named Stan who's like, hey, as this company is going bankrupt, I'm taking as much technology as I can and jumping ship. Do you want to come with me? I'm sure we can make a buck off of this. And, and then lo and behold, in FNAF 6, we see the same Stan selling mediocre melodies. So it's really interesting. But one of those names we see is Ralph. Ralph pops up a lot, and Ralph seems to be one of the employees that was poached by William Afton to join Fazbear's. But Ralph is an interesting case because Ralph seemingly was the last person who wore the Captain Springlock suit, and he was injured wearing that suit. And it seems like the timeline of events here is he gets injured with the Springlock suit, and William Afton then approaches him being like, hey, do you want to join my company, and we'll give you a good, join my company, we'll pay you better, right? That's the information we have. I think the speculation I would like to add on top is the idea of think about if we know from the week before, Ralph / the Phone Guy is fiercely loyal to Fazbear's. Fiercely. And Foxy, I think Bonzi pointed this out to me first. Other people pointed this out first. In the story the week before, Ralph keeps saying that Foxy was his favorite. And in the FNAF 2 phone call, it's like, yeah, Foxy was always my favorite or whatever. If Ralph was Captain Springlock for Murray's Costume Manor, lo and behold, that show is all about Foxy and Roxy. But mainly Foxy is the star of that show. Regardless, imagine you're Ralph, and you work for Murray's Costume Manor, and your main job is you have to put on a performance for shareholders to be like, look at what our stuff can do for you. And one day, you're injured buy that suit that you're forced to wear every single day. It hurts you. And if it's a Springlock suit, it hurts you badly. Imagine if, you're this employee, you've been hurt by this company, and then a man you don't know approaches you and says, hey, I also work in the entertainment industry. I think you're very valuable. Why don't you work for me? I'll pay you more. I'll give you a higher position, and I'll help you win this lawsuit against Murray's Costume Manor. Not only would you jump at that opportunity, frankly, I would think it's too good to be true. I'd be a little worried, but I would jump at that opportunity too. If William Afton didn't fuck over Ralph and is being honest here and pays him more, gives him a higher position, and helped him with that lawsuit against Murray's Costume Manor, I think that would perfectly justifiably explain why Ralph is so fiercely loyal to Fazbear's and willing to put up with so much bullshit from Fazbear Entertainment, because way back in the 70s, they were there for him. So the least he can do is be there for them. I've heard dissenting information or dissenting opinions on if Ralph was the same Ralph. But if I was Ralph, and this is what happened, I think it makes perfect sense for Ralph to jump ship for Fazbear's and become incredibly loyal to this new company. But thank you for your question. Our next one comes from Phoebe. Actually, no, before I move on, fun fact, I'm going to quickly shout this out. Tomorrow, if you're watching this as it comes out, tomorrow, Wednesday, the 25th of June, we will be playing an all-cup tour of Mario Kart World, going through every single course we can. And I'm playing with a bunch of people, but, one of those is Apex Dragonoid, so be there. It's going to be cool. Our next question comes from Phoebe, them. Big stretch, as I don't really have evidence. But what if Fiona is related to Henry, maybe his sister? That would explain the familiarity with Henry and a wound first inflicted on me, as it seems like Fiona's death is the earliest thing in the timeline. I thank you for your question. I keep hearing this, and I don't see the reason behind it. Where a lot of people keep bringing up, what if Henry and Fiona are sisters? Is it possible? Yes. I just don't see any reasonable evidence for it. Only in the idea of, it doesn't seem necessary. If Murray's Costume Manor is close enough in Utah for Fazbear, being titans of the industry, they're going to meet each other, so they would meet, William, Henry, and Edwin would meet eventually. And they don't need this familial connection. It could, like I said, it could very well be that Fiona and Henry are related, but we don't know that, and there's no evidence that I can find that's pointing to that. As far as the second question, would a wound first inflicted on me be Fiona's death? Even if Henry and Fiona are married, or not married, God, even if Henry and Fiona are related, then I don't think Fiona's death would be a wound first inflicted on Henry, because one, the Fall Fest fire, as we know it, is an accident. We have no reason to believe it was on purpose. The only evidence or speculation I've seen that the Fall Fest fire was on purpose was that Edwin says you weren't even supposed to be there. And then somebody else points out, when he hears Fiona, which is M1, but when another employee hears Fiona in the basement, he's like, is Fiona alive? Was this an insurance scam? So I've heard people say, oh, maybe Fall Fest Fire was on purpose by Edwin to be an insurance scam, but he didn't know Fiona was going to be there. I disagree with that interpretation. I think the insurance scam line is just brought up because someone thinks Fiona actually didn't die and they faked her death for the insurance. And second of all, that's really early in the timeline, Fiona's death, and I don't see Edwin causing a fire that killed people to get insurance money that early on in the timeline. Maybe when he was really desperate, but that early on, I don't see it. So I guess to put a bow on it, I don't think so. It is possible, but I just don't see any evidence saying that it's likely. We're past 45 in the recording, but I know it took a couple breaks. Let me see if I have another quick one. Here's one more we can do. One last question. Jalen, them. Do you think now that we know more about the secret of the Mimic and that Chica's from Edwin, did this make Chica's I was the first line mean even more? Yes and no. So thank you for your question. But we did learn a lot more about how Chica joins the Fazbear gang. But I wouldn't say is from Edwin, and that's where I was the first makes more sense. I think it's the idea that Chica as a character did exist before the other Freddy's characters did. So that does give credence to the whole, like, I was the first. But it seems like Chica as a character existed from Chica's party world before approaching Edwin. It was just Murray's company and Fiona's designs that gave them the full suit of Chica. And that was then sold to Chica's party world. Chica's party world then goes under, and likely Fazbear buys them up. However, I still think I was the first is just referring to Susie being the first in the MCI. Because, she very likely was. I just don't have much else to add for that. But thank you for your question, Jalen. And I think we'll call it there. Because, again, my eyes are still sleepy. I can drink as much caffeine in the world. I want to not have bright lights in my face. I want to turn my fan back on. And I think we're close to 45 minutes. But expect more Secret of the Remnant content. We're not even close to done talking about this game. So I'll see you on Friday for another big old theory of it. But until next time, thank you for watching the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, where the pizza abilities are endless. We hope to enjoy your future patronage. Bye-bye for now.